Dave from Online Casino HQ, and today's guest is JTodd, who probably doesn't need any introduction, but thank you for joining us anyway, Jay. First off, you started out in the industry way back, probably about the same time I got into the industry, around about 2000, 2001, as an iGaming affiliate. What actually piqued your interest to get involved into iGaming? With me, it was different. I was offered a job by an operator based in Gibraltar, and I thought, yeah, I'm in my 20s, living abroad. It's a dream, basically. Good weather, but why did you suddenly get involved in iGaming?
I'm trying to adjust my camera real quick to where I can look at you, and my camera.
Yeah, no worries.
Fine. So, getting into iGaming, believe it or not, I was a store detective for 12 years or so. If you don't know what that is, it's kind of like the guy that catches shoplifters.
Yeah.
I was that guy. And that was a fun job I just kind of fell backwards into during college. And when I graduated college, I had a degree in marketing and telecom. But of course, back then, there was no such thing as the internet because I'm old. And so I kept catching shoplifters. Well, the bad thing about that line of work is that if you're really good at what you do, you get fired quite a bit. And I was decently good at what I did. So occasionally I got fired. And one time when I got fired, I came home and I was a single father at the time. I had my little girl was, I don't know, year and a half. And I thought, it'd be really nice to work from home. But 2000, as you know, the internet's still fairly new. We're still trying to get to know it. I have no coding experience, no experience with PPC or anything like that online. I didn't even know those terms. I just knew where the porn sites were. I'm kidding. But I went on and I did a keyword search to see how people were making money online. And the three returns I got were, the top three were free, sex, and casino. And free did not sound profitable to me. So then I looked at sex and I'm like, well, okay, I know what they're doing there, but I've got my 1-year-old daughter. I'm not going to get it. So tell me about this casino thing. So I started researching casinos and how people make money promoting them. I didn't even know they called it affiliate marketing. And I got an idea in my head. I was like, maybe if I built a website reviewing these things, I could send people through that. I thought I had an epiphany, an original idea, like I was the first guy to think of this. So I started building websites, having never seen another affiliate portal or anything, but I gave it a shot, and eventually I found out there were other people with this idea. I studied, I improved my sites, and by 2001, back in those days, I'm sure you can relate that all you had to do is put up a site, and pretty much you could make money.
Yeah.
And by gum, my first month I made $400. My second month I made.
In your first month, you were earning money pretty much from
my first month.
Wow.
Captain Cook's Casino, $425 or whatever. And then the month after that, I made considerably, probably 10 times that much. And the month after that, it was more, and I was off and running, my friend.
And it's snowball effect then, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was more money than I'd ever made in my life. And yeah, it was really an eye-opening experience to see, because I go back and I think about that first site, and I recall what it was like in my mind. And I was using dial-up and one of these drag and drop programs, and I lived out in the boonies of the woods, kind of like I do now. You talk about a slow process. I mean, and so I started using Dreamweaver, and then, just to upload and to preview those pages and not having any coding experience at all. I'm shocked that I made money. It was only the grace of God, but that's basically how I kind of fell backwards into the world of online gambling.
They were fun days back then. I often wish that I started my first affiliate site back in 2000, 2001, when I started it in 2004, because I thought, the early years, they were the best years to get into it. But I have to say, even when I started, my site, you had lots of what I would call weekend warriors who would hold down a day job, and at night they'd work in their bedroom in their home on their site. And then once it started making money, you then got a really big decision to make. Do you carry on with your day job, or do you invest all your time in this new site that you've launched? And that was it took me 8 months before I got my first revenue payment, and that was with Fortune affiliates. But like as you say, each month it then started. It was a pure snowball effect, whereby each month was far greater than the previous month. And yeah, giving them my notice, I had to work the 3 months notice period. But yeah, and those 3 months I was earning more from my part-time weekend job than I was earning where I was working at Labrooks. It was great times back then, and I often look back and think, oh, even though we had lots of crises and it was like the Wild West back then, it was more fun, certainly. And like what you're saying with learning how to code, I think everyone's in the same position. You know, HTML, what's this? And you know, I know some affiliates even use Microsoft Word to upload their sites, which is pretty bad, I know, but that did happen.
Yeah, it was, I think my greatest pleasure was about 6 to 8 months in, because I got fired in like October, just right after September 11th of 2001, when the planes flew into the buildings. I had been working and kind of messing with it before that, not really understanding what I was doing. So I had a couple of websites that I put up that the domain name was just long and hyphenated, and I just thought, oh, keywords. But as I learned, I finally got the Integrity Casino Guide, which was my first real website that had any success, in about October of 2001. And, I look back at it and I'm like, has no business being successful, but it was. But my greatest pleasure was that next summer in 2002, when I had enough money to finally go out and buy a new car, buy new clothes, and start living a little bit better, going back to the place that fired me and running into the manager that let me go in the parking lot in my new convertible with the top down. I was like, hey, how you doing, man?
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
I'm too petty. That's petty, but it felt good at the time.
Now, I remember, and I know the YouTube was only opened in 2007, but you were one of, before APCW and before This Week in Gambling, which is the two things that people will know you for in the present day. Back then, you used to do videos for your sites, and I do remember you doing one to do with American Idol, where you're you've cut it so you're basically doing this impersonation of this dancer or whatever in front of Simon Cowell. So what got you into video content?
Well, that was the whole thing. Is back in college, like I said, I had my degree in communications. It was telecommunications. And what I really wanted to do, I felt my calling was just to be like Saturday Night Live, a comedy show. Back in college, I actually did a comedy show. We did mini sketches. A lot of the material we did, ironically, was later, I say, stolen by someone else. It was just like the way I thought of affiliate marketing. Someone else had my ideas for these comedy shows that we did, but years later, and I would see our ideas in some way, shape, or form working their way into sitcoms. And it made me kind of sick, because I was like, could have been me. I could have done that. But living in Texas, not really close to Hollywood or the New York theater or anything like that, or even something like Second City, which was, I believe, Chicago, or maybe there was something going on up in Canada. I'm not exactly sure. Point being is that I didn't have those opportunities. So, but I always had an interest in that kind of stuff. And the videos that I did in college were comedy videos and based very much following like the Python type of format, where we would have sketch comedy, but it was loosely woven together into some type of thematic show. So we could have a show under one title and present these sketches or these other. fast forward to when I started doing Integrity Casino Guide. I was sitting with Anthony, my best buddy, who now helps to run the GPWA. We were at a CAC conference, Casino Affiliate Convention.
Mark Lesnick's conference.
Yeah, Mark Lesnick back in, I believe, 2003 or so. And sitting there, I just listening to a session had an epiphany, and I wrote down on a sheet of paper, because we were listening, I said video casino reviews, and I underlined video and shoved it over to Anthony, and he was like, what do you mean? Like, just talk about the thing, you know, talk about the casino. Oh, it's got this software and this payouts and this, who owns it. But I was like, no, let's make them entertaining. And my philosophy was that by opening myself up to the people who were coming to my website, by showing them a face that I was an American, that spoke the same language, that had a family, lived in a house, paid my mortgage, they would have a little bit more of a trust factor in me.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you got to remember back then, 2001, 2002, 2003 even, people were still a little, you know, hesitant about this internet thing.
Yeah.
Especially entering credit card information and putting their financial information out there. And looking back, maybe they were right to be concerned, but that was at least my philosophy, is that I was gonna show them who I was and build that trust factor so that there would be more of a higher conversion rate. And matter of fact, people at Fortune Affiliates later told me that they would rather get 100 clicks from my site than 1,000 clicks from another site, because the conversions and the quality of the players was so much better.
Your conversion rate was so much higher than your competitors.
It was, and that was partly because, you know, through my own fault, I wasn't very good at website optimization or SEO, and so I relied a lot on PPC, pay-per-click, for my traffic. So again, my leads were pre-qualified. I think that had something to do with it. They were already looking for what I was selling.
So what did you use? Did you use like Overture for Yahoo?
I did. I used Overture, and I had I forget. It's been so long. I forget. Was Overture the name of the company?
Yeah, Overture was the name of the company.
I had like 3,000, 4,000 keywords, so I used a back-end system to manage all of them that actually, you know, managed my bids and would move them up and down. And I was spending probably, and I know in today's terms, there's a lot of webmasters out there a lot bigger than this, but consider I was just a one-man operation who knew nothing about website design, HTML, pay-per-clicks back in 2000, 2001. And here I am in 2003, just a couple of years later, spending $3,000, $4,000 a month managing my pay-per-click campaigns. So the growth was phenomenal. But to your question, I thought about these video things. I remembered how I used to do the videos in college, and I said, well, I'll make them kind of like that. So yes, I put myself in it was for Blackjack Ballroom, a audition for American Idol. And actually, I don't know if I'm going to
find the clip. It must be on the Wayback Machine somewhere.
I have the videos. I can actually send you. Now,
that'd be even better.
They're lower quality, because back then, you know, we didn't have the bandwidth. There was no YouTube.
Hey guys, how you doing?
We're very good. So what are you going to sing?
I'm going to be performing Blackjack Ballroom in C major.
All right, go for it.
Thanks. Oops, I did it again. Played a casino online. Was I just wasting my time? I should have played at Blackjack Ballroom. They have amazing payouts, and if you'll check them out, then you will have no doubt what customer service is about. They have the best games anywhere with micro gaming software. The site is really a hit. Blackjack Ballroom is the
You'd be very good in a sort of a strange, obscure cabaret club.
Oh, you think so?
You should be wearing ladies' underwear, red lipstick, and a cabaret.
What? Ladies' underwear?
Yes.
Really? Whatever.
Post some yourself on your site then, did you? Wow.
Yes. I made enough money back then. I was able to pay programmers at that point to make my sites better and to optimize them. And so what I did was when I made the videos, I created the programmer created a way where they could not be downloaded off the website. We locked them up because, I mean, obviously back then, 2003, there wasn't even a YouTube. These things were what I thought was reasonably entertaining. And so I thought probably helped with my conversions and time on site, right? And my trust factor. So I wanted to, they're proprietary, so I wanted to keep them. I didn't want other people stealing them because, as we know in this industry, especially people who are not from necessarily the core group of nations that we have so many friends in, there are people in other countries and behind curtains and walls that want to do this kind of thing. They have no qualms at all about stealing material. Even today, people will scrape sites and steal your material. So I locked them down, but yeah, we had the Blackjack Ballroom. I really, another one that people really loved was the one for Captain Cook's Casino, where I was standing down by the shore. If you haven't seen that one, that's an enjoyable one as well. I'll send you both, and if you want to put them in, you can.
No, that'd be good, because I mean, I do remember them vaguely from back in the day. But you must have been the very first iGaming affiliate to produce video content. Certainly that armor.
I think so. And if I wasn't the first, I was probably one of the first. And I was certainly, I can say this with some degree of confidence, I was certainly the first to produce the video reviews in the manner that I did, being more of a short little sketch of 1.5 to 3 minutes that was entertaining and had characters. It wasn't just a dry review with a voiceover and some screenshots. So yeah.
Fast forward a few years, and then we had that ridiculous Safe Port Act pass with the UIGA pinned.
Yeah, and that's I mean, it's a really big skip, because a lot of things happened that led up to that, you know. And the UIGEA, in my opinion, it was the precursor to a lot of things, but it wasn't what actually killed the industry. What actually killed the industry happened in January 2007, when the DOJ arrested the former owners of NetTeller. NetTeller kept things going even after UIGEA, and I think the federal government realized there was just no way they were going to be able to stop what was going on as long as funding took place, and they could not force NetTeller to stop. So what the US government tends to do so well is to manipulate the situation to get what they want. We could look around the world and talk about far more than just online gambling to show examples of US government involvement and manipulation in things. But in this particular case, what they realized is that NetTeller was a publicly held company. So they went out and they arrested the former, they weren't even the active, the former owners of NetTeller, and charged them with all sorts of violations of, you know, fraud and wire stuff. And what that had the effect of sending the stock plummeting. And as soon as the stock plummeted, shareholders realized what the government was doing and just said, you know what, just wash our hands of online gambling. We'll keep things going with other industries, but we're done. We're out of online gambling. And you never heard anything after that about what happened with those owners. All you knew is that your income went from 5 figures to 0 overnight.
Because you had a few years before that, PayPal was
PayPal
initially, and then they left.
PayPal was, PayPal bowed out before NetTeller. PayPal left. NetTeller, the reason NetTeller was successful was because PayPal cut out.
Everyone moved on to NetTeller because PayPal had left, basically.
Right. And so yeah, we get to UIGEA, and that starts the ball rolling toward what really killed us. And it was essentially the difference between starving us out or cutting off our air supply is what it really, it went from being a slow process where eventually we might fall if we don't find another way to get around the UIGEA. But when they took out NetTeller, they essentially stepped on our air hose, and we couldn't survive more than a few seconds.
And then they went after all the big operators as well, didn't they? The likes of David Carruthers, 888.
Yeah.
Joker.
It's funny because Carruthers, you know, I've met the guy a couple of times. Carruthers is a funny guy. If you remember Ted Lowe, at that same conference,
very good friend, yeah.
Yeah, well, at the same conference, I came up with the idea for video casino reviews. Ted and I and Brian Bailey actually were on a panel discussing fraud, and Carruthers was sitting down front next to Anthony, and I'll never forget. I said, oh, well, you know, we're dealing with fraud. Of course, the worst part for that is dealing with fraud coming out of Asia. Back then, there was a lot of fraud out of Asia, and everyone knew it. But of course, Ted Lowe, I think he was from Taiwan.
Thailand.
Was where?
Thailand.
Thailand. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice guy. I loved him. I apologize for getting the country wrong. But I said, well, you know what, the fraud in Asia, and Ted Lowe goes, there's no fraud in Asia. And in front of the whole room, Carruthers goes, bullshit. I was like, I love this guy. But yeah, I mean, of course, we all know what happened to David. And again, it was the American government's abuse of power that got him arrested.
What was that? Was that Bet on Sports? Was that who he was?
Yeah, I believe it was Bet on Sports. And the way I heard and read that they caught him, of course, he was on a layover in Dallas, in my home state of Texas. So what I heard the feds did was they pulled the flight manifest. They had the, I guess maybe a sealed indictment or whatever against him. And so he didn't know they were looking for him. But to defend Mr. Carruthers for a moment, the U.S. government, what I heard was since they had his name flagged, they were able to pull flight manifests, and they found out he was on that flight. So they were waiting for him in Dallas. Now, in my opinion, not being a lawyer, that sounds like an abuse of power to me, because they were using the Patriot Act to combat terrorism to pull up a flight manifest of a British national who worked in the UK, lived in Costa Rica, had a casino that was licensed out of Antigua. And so they're going to arrest him for the sins of the people in the States, because they know they can't go and arrest all the players. So they just have to crush the head, right? But to defend the American position, I mean, if you look at what they're saying, Carruthers was doing things like pulling up a bus outside of sporting events. Bet on Sports was pulling up buses outside of sporting events, getting on the satellite to the internet, and letting people come on and place sports bets from their bus in the parking lot of these games, college games. And I mean, there's only so many times you can kick a bull in the balls and not expect it's going to turn around and gore you, right? So, I mean, that was, he just didn't care. He was like, we're not breaking any laws, and we're going to keep going. And what's bad about it is that you can indeed be right and still lose and get arrested. I mean, if you could be dying for fighting for a noble cause and still die, right? And that's what happened. I mean, there were no clean hands. Let's just be honest. But you got Big Brother, and that's not a fight you're going to win. Which ironically segues kind of perfectly into what pushed me out of the affiliate industry.
So is this your case in particular, though? Wasn't it a case that Washington State at state level, going up, we're about to go after any affiliate working in iGaming? Am I right in thinking that? And that's the reason why you had to basically shut them all down or get rid of them?
Yes. I mean, after 2007 in January, when NetTeller went down, all the profits just dried up. There was still some money coming in. Now, you got to remember, I was running APCW by that moment. And back then, APCW stood for the Association of Professional casino webmasters. There was nothing about players involved at all. The reason players got involved and the name was changed later was because after UIGEA, when I started doing videos for APCW, there was still not a lot of people doing videos. We're still talking about the infancy of YouTube. So when people started wondering what the hell was going on, player, webmaster, whatever, they found my videos and started listening to them. And what we discovered is that we had a lot of players, probably more players than webmasters, actually watching the videos. So we changed the name to be inclusive, because back then we were all, you know, joining the fight. You remember that call to action?
Yes.
We were all in this together. We wanted to be, whether you're a player, an operator, or a webmaster, we were all trying to present a united front. But I was able to survive off of money from APCW and a little bit of residual income off of players in other countries who weren't necessarily maybe using NetTeller, but they might have been British or Australian or whatever, but they were using an alternative payment method. So a few dollars would trickle in. So we were able to tread water and survive. But the flip side of that was that Washington State decided to become highly aggressive toward online gambling directly as a result of tribal gaming influence. I love tribal gaming today because I work with many of them and I understand their philosophy and I understand what they are going for and trying to achieve. I'm a big defender of tribal sovereignty and tribal rights, and I've interviewed people from NIJA and the California coalitions, and even I was good friends with Chuck Barnett, who held the master license for Ganawagi for many years. You know, what the Washington State tribal gaming wanted was an end completely to online gambling because they believe it cannibalized their industry, which we all know is completely untrue. But Margarita Prentice was the state congresswoman or state rep, I'm not sure, who or senator or rep, who was instrumental in representing tribal rights at the state level to such a degree that they just wanted to accommodate her. And so they criminalized hyperlinking to a casino site, which meant, because I lived in Washington, even if a player came in from Mexico and my site was hosted in Utah and they went to a British casino that was licensed out of Antigua but headquartered out of Panama, I was still guilty of bookmaking because I received a percent of profit from illegal gambling, which Washington State technically had no jurisdiction over.
Wow, wow. Did they actually convict anyone or try and get anyone?
Yeah, I can get into that in just a moment. It was kind of periphery, on the periphery. It was a Washington State resident, but he actually got raided and then arrested. But I can tell you more about that in just one moment. To digress just a moment, I flash back to my shoplifting days. Back then, I had a lot of friends that were police officers, and I started doing this in Texas. And so I asked one of my Houston police officer buddies one day, being curious about the law, I said, in Texas, we can carry rifles. You see them in the back of pickup trucks. Yeah, I grew up with all of that. And I said, it's totally legal as long as they're unloaded. So I said, so what would stop someone from carrying a rifle unloaded in a public place? He goes, well, technically nothing. I said, so I could dress in full camo, grab a rifle, and go walking through a mall parking lot, and it's totally legal? He goes, in his best Texas accent, he goes, let me tell you what would happen, son. First of all, we're going to roll up on you, guns drawn, and if you even fart, we're going to drop you. Then we're going to throw your ass to the ground, bust up your shit, throw you in cuffs, throw you in the back of that patrol car, send you down there. After we process you, and you have to get a lawyer, defend yourself. It's going to be months, bail out, defend your name. After all of that, if you're found not guilty, we'll give you your busted ass gun back to you and go, yeah, sorry about that. And the expression he used was, you might beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. So I called the Washington State Gambling Commission. I said, hey, this is who I am, and this is what you don't want to hear. The chief enforcement officer goes, yeah, I know who you are. I was like,
Oh,
cool.
dear.
So, well, you got to remember, at the time when they passed the law, I was very vocal.
I know.
And in the one hand, it was beneficial for me because it kind of parlayed itself into what I do now. On the other side, it was very non-beneficial to me because had I been more savvy, I could have sold my sites to a shelf corp and continued to manage them and just moved everything offshore. And they probably did not have the resources or the technology to truly investigate me and find out what was going on. But because I am such a, I was so reactionary to what was going on, I felt it was an injustice. So I started running my mouth, which is kind of what I do. And that got me a lot of attention. Like I said, newspapers, radio shows, things like that. So I made myself an even bigger target for Washington State. So I asked them, I said, look, I'm going to shut down my websites, my casino affiliate sites, but I'm going to keep APCW up and going because we're not providing hyperlinks to any gambling site. And the commissioner said, that's fine, go ahead. And I was like, all right, you have my number. If there's ever a problem, come on and just call me. Let me know if I'm doing something that you don't like, because I've got a family at the time. And I really don't want to see a bunch of black SUVs pull up outside my house all in a row with a bunch of guys in, you know, suits off the rack from Sears get out and sunglasses and start hooking me up. So he said, don't worry about it. He goes, because I built actually a nice little rapport with him. I didn't just talk to him one day. I talked to him several times over months. And it got to where we would talk and laugh and about family and stuff. I'm like, this is the guy that's going to arrest me.
Yeah.
If it comes to shove. So I felt pretty good that I wasn't violating any laws, but it came at the expense of me walking away from all the affiliate sites. And to talk about the guy that got arrested, I'll say his name because it's public record and it's online. You can Google it and search for it if you want. It might even be kind of hard to find right now. But at the height of when APCW was really starting to take off and the join the fight stuff was going on, I got an email from a gentleman in Seattle, which is about 100 miles south of me. And he was starting a website called Betcha, BETCHA.com. His name was Nick Jenkins, and he wanted to meet with me about this new website idea he was going to run from Seattle that was a gambling operator. I said, color me intrigued. So I drove about 50 miles. He drove about 50 miles. We met up and had coffee. And he told me that the concept was, it was a betting exchange to where you could bet against me, I could bet against you, but no one had to pay if they lost. I said, explain this to me. Yeah. He goes, well, we have an honor system and you start off with like 5 trust points. And the more you pay, if you lose a bet, the higher your trust score goes. If you don't pay, your trust score falls, or if you pay slowly, it falls a little bit. So the concept is that if I win 100 quid bet with you and you don't pay, I report it, your trust score goes down, no one bets with you anymore. No one's going to even participate. But if you do pay, then your trust score goes up, people will bet with you. Now, his philosophy was that this is not a violation of Washington state law because since you're not forced to pay, that removes one of the 3 requirements for it to be gambling. There has to be consideration or something of value. There has to be an element of chance, like the throw of a dice, and there has to be a payout. So you remove any one of those, you don't have gambling. So he talked with I. Nelson Rose and got an opinion from Mr. Rose that seemed to encourage him. I don't want to put words in Mr. Rose's mouth. I wasn't privy to that conversation, but that's what he told me. My response to him was, you're going to jail because Washington State is not going to care about your philosophy. Washington State is going to give you the ride that you might not beat, even though you might beat the rat. I told him this was going to happen. I told him the whole story about the Texas and the gun and the whatever. And he seemed pretty confident that he was correct. So he went home and made plans to put this website into operation, which he did. The day after he did, he got a cease and desist letter from the Washington State Gambling Commission, which he ignored.
Oh dear.
Oh dear is an understatement, my friend. The state of Washington then worked with the gambling regulators in the state of Louisiana. Louisiana officials went on to betcha.com and placed a bet, which they lost, and Betcha profited from that bet. I believe the total was like 38 cents or something like that. It was minuscule. It was like, if it was $1, it was.
They just wanted to prove the concept that
yes,
they were accepting money.
For that profit of less than $1 or so, about a week after he ignored the cease and desist, Washington Gambling Commission showed up, walked into the office. Now listen to this. They walk in, hand him the paperwork or the court order, what it is, and they start taking everything out of the office. Computers, desks, chairs, everything but the carpet. And Nick later told me that as they're leaving, they're putting stickers on it for auction. Now, mind you, he hasn't been convicted. He hasn't had his day in court, but as they're taking the stuff out, they're putting the stickers on it to auction it off as seized proceeds of an illegal gambling operation. That's the power of the Gambling Commission. Now you kind of know why I was a little, hey, you guys aren't going to arrest me.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, if they'll do that.
Certainly government agencies of any description, they say jump, you say how high, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what I was going through at the time, watching this stuff unfold. So, I mean, if you ever wondered why, I mean, when I used to do my shows, sometimes I would have an American flag behind me turned upside down. It was a sign of distress. That's an international sign of distress.
Really?
The flag upside down, yeah, with the stars at the bottom. And so I did that for some of my videos as a political statement, because, I mean, you're watching this happen. You have I mean, imagine you're making six-figure income. And in the course of 6 months, they criminalize it, take all your income from you, threaten to throw you in prison, and then you're watching this kind of stuff happen to somebody else who lives 100 miles away from you. So yeah, it was an interesting time for sure, and there was a lot of fear, and that kind of, you know, that kind of molded who I became.
So for you, it was a double whammy. So not only were you in a position where a lot of the operators that you were working with could no longer take US players because they pulled out the US market, you couldn't actually run your business anymore, because if you did, you'd be jailed. Fantastic.
That's true. That's it in a nutshell. Yes. And so that's when I started focusing on APCW. And the whole reason that the videos came to exist is actually because of Anthony, the guy who I've been best friends with him since I was 14 years old. And, you know, he did some work for me when I was an affiliate and making money and doing APCW. I actually hired Anthony to help me run APCW, even though he was still a part-time webmaster and had a full-time job doing other things. So when I was ready to give up, pretty much, Anthony said, you need to do a video about what the US government is doing.
Yeah.
And I said, why me? And he says, because no one else is going to do it, which I guess was true, because here we are even to this day, and we can look back at the history and no one really jumped in there. I mean, retrospectively, I suppose it would have been more intelligent of me to, instead of rattling the saber and trying to, you know, get the troops motivated, if I would have just taken a step back, kept my mouth shut, and buried all my activities even deeper, that might have been the more productive, more profitable way to go. But no one's ever accused me of being a good business person. What I do, I have opinions, I run my mouth, I can articulate things. So whether people agree with me or not, I at least have that skill set. So that's kind of what I emulated to, because I mean, remember, again, I didn't have a lot of SEO or experience in website design. So I was still focusing on my strengths. But I made the first video for APCW, and then it just, you know, exploded. And a large amount of that, again, goes back to Anthony, because while I was filming and scripting and editing and producing, he was the promotional aspect of it. So he would go out and post it in forums and on message boards and blogs and other things.
And then you would get webmasters who would just pick it up and embed it on their sites anyway.
That was the flip side of what we were doing. Yes, sir. We would say, we'll give you a reciprocal link where you're going to get free material and free content for your website, which again, I think is what led us to change the name to, include players, because they're embedding this on their portals and players are watching it and getting educated.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of the stuff you talk about in your shows are player issues anyway. So certainly with regards to the regulation, which we'll touch upon later on. But yeah, I know there are other sites now doing like podcasts and vlogs at the same time, pretty much probably similar to what I'm doing here now with you, but there isn't anyone doing what you've been doing for the last 10, 15 years still, as far as I'm aware, although I do tend to keep myself to only a few sites these days without going on to any other forums, as it were.
Well, yeah, I don't think that there was a group. There's been groups over the years that try to compete.
You had like one like Casino Reports for a time, I guess, and
yeah, and I don't have a problem with other people. I mean, it's news. It is what it is. But working with the people I work with now at Casino City and GPWA, I guess I can express why it doesn't bother me that other people do this by this conversation. I asked them one time, we were having kind of a disagreement about the direction to go with the APCW video. And I asked them, I said, why do people watch APCW videos? And the response I got was to learn about what's going on and to get the news. And I said, that is incorrect. People get the news during the week. They read in message boards. They look at the feeds that come in these news sites. They get their news from anywhere. So why do they tune in to the APCW video to hear me regurgitate the same thing? And it's because, in my opinion, there's certainly a little bit of an entertainment value to it. They want to see me maybe get mad or expand upon it or whatever. But that goes to the deeper thing, I think, of needing to connect. And you have frustrations. Webmasters have these frustrations, I believe, about these injustices and the bullshit that goes on with what your government's doing and what these regulators are doing. And they have no outlet. They have no sounding board. So if I can go on there and I guess it's kind of like, poetry. You read a poem, you're like, oh, I couldn't express it, but that's how I feel. Or a song. Wow, I love that song because it really speaks to how I feel. I hope the videos are a little bit like that, where maybe they don't have a blog and they talk to their wife or their husband or whatever, and they got these frustrations, but when they hear me express these and can put a like on the video and see other people commenting, yeah, I agree with you. Maybe it gives them a sense of community and camaraderie and that they're not the only ones going through this, having to put up with this BS. So
I think also because they're released regularly, I'll give you a case in point exactly what you're talking about. The Ukraine war, Russia's special military operation, as they like to call it. My source of news, obviously I read all the mainstream media and all the websites, etc., but there is a YouTuber called Jake Bro who lives in Vegas, and he is brilliant because what he does, he basically brings all the sources of information and then basically covers it in a half-an-hour video, which he releases every 2 days. He is very pro-Ukrainian, but he does tell it how it is, and that's why he's got 500,000 subscribers, I guess, and is able to get people such as General Ben Hodges, etc., on his channel from time to time. But yeah, they people want the personal touch of that information, so they can relate to you actually telling the news as well. And I think that you're right. That is why people watch it. And if you regularly update at a certain day of the week or a certain week of the month, people are going to come back. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, hopefully. I mean, not to the same degree, obviously, because video, you can never capture that in-person feeling. But I like to think of it kind of like as going to a concert or going to church or going to a rally of some kind. You're around like-minded people who think like you and have basically the same experiences and belief system. And it's therapeutic in some ways, I guess.
Yeah. Well, going off a little bit here, that makes me think, when we moved back from Gibraltar back to England, my wife said, don't tell anyone what you do. Because obviously in Gibraltar, everyone's either in the military or works for a gaming company, or a lawyer who works for the gaming company. But moving back to England, don't tell them that you work in online gambling, etc. And there's like this whole secrecy thing, like it's a really bad thing that you're doing. It's like you're an alcoholic or a drug addict or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose it is quite good to have an outlet where you're actually listening to somebody who is actually working in the industry, relaying the news to you.
Well, I'm a church going guy, and I never had a problem telling people exactly what I did. Some people in the church will say, oh, gambling's this or gambling's that. Same people who think drinking is going to send me to hell or whatever. They have no foot to stand on with me, because I actually know what the good book says, and they only know what the preacher says, and they kind of justify their beliefs, based on, they have a tendency to cherry pick things to bolster their personal beliefs without actually going and looking at what is said and then building their beliefs around that. So I understand that there are some people that don't like it, and I understand why people might not share what they do for a living with others. But when people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I'm a marketer in the gaming industry, and that's not because I'm ashamed of anything. It's
well, that's technically what you do anyway. So
well, yeah, I mean, it's twofold. Number one, what I do is kind of, if you don't understand the gaming industry and online gambling and the history of it and video production and content, then there's a little bit of a base I have to build in a conversation to kind of explain why I do what I do, how I do it, and how it actually makes me money. The flip side of that is that when I was married, I was told that sometimes when I talk about what I do, I'm bragging. And I never felt like I was bragging. I just felt like I was excited because I thought I had the coolest job in the world.
Isn't it good to be appeased by your job?
I get to make video for a living. And to me, that's exciting. I mean, I get to be creative because that's part of me. I have this creative need for me, which is why I went to college and did what I did, to be a marketer. It's fun to be creative, and there's writing involved. But everyone thinks video, you just point a camera and shoot, but I'm sure that you've done some video, that's not true.
You've got to do scripts. If anything's unscripted, it's all and you're by the time you've edited the video, you've got about 2 minutes.
About this much to people. When I go and I shoot video at conferences, people will see me shooting, and they're like, man, you've got a lot of material. And I always say, better to have too much than too little.
Absolutely.
It's easier to cut things than it is to create things.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So when people ask me about that and I share, I have a tendency just to leave it at that, because number one, I don't want to appear like I'm full of myself, because if anyone who's met me, they know hopefully they understand and see that I'm not pretentious, and I feel very, very blessed to be able to run my stupid mouth for a living.
Yeah, not just that, you're probably one of the most approachable people that I personally know in the industry. Certainly in the case whereby I don't mind going up to you and say, would you mind coming on our little vlog? Right. Do you know what I mean? Well, there are some people who are up their own backsides that particularly in this industry as well, which you wouldn't even think of approaching to us, because you know that you'd get a talk to the hand, and who are you kind of look back at those out.
There is some of that. I think primarily, and maybe I'm shielded a little bit because you and I are kind of like old timers now.
Yeah.
There's very few of us. So when you're an old timer in an industry like this, people may cut you some slack or cut you a break. And so when I walk up to people or talk to them, they're like, oh, because of your position in the industry. And I don't mean that arrogantly. I mean that just because I've been in the industry so long, certainly, Brian Bailey and Tom Galanis and even, there's many people out there, Debbie Silverman, there's just
Michael.
tons of people. Michael Korfman, yes, there's tons of people out there that are just like me. We're old timers. We've been there. People just know who you are. So that's not me saying I'm JTodd. It's just me saying I'm part of a group that was a core that went through the same things I went through way back in the day. And like in the case of Brian Bailey, even before me, Brian Bailey's in the industry probably, I don't know, 5 years.
I think probably into casino, probably the only person that's eclipsed Brian. I mean, what was it, 1998, isn't it? So
yeah, he was
26 years
ahead of me. The first conference I went to, Brian Bailey was there. I had no idea who I was. And as a matter of fact, when I started APCW, I was searching the internet to see if anyone was talking about APCW, if we were getting any traction. And I found an article written by Brian. Well, maybe it was written by him. It had his name on it. And he talked about APCW. What's that?
It would have been written by him back then. Yeah.
Well, okay. So he's like, there's this new program, APCW. It's being run by this character who calls himself JTodd.
Yeah, that sounds like Brian's writing.
I was like, character? I'm a character. But I actually brought this up with him years later. I was like, yeah, you call me a character. And he just kind of giggled. He's like, yeah, all right. That's probably right. But it worked out. I mean, I don't blame him for being skeptical. We're in an industry full of scam artists who will say anything to part you from your money or anything to gain your trust. So he was perfectly justified to be skeptical. Fortunately, over the years, I was able to prove that no, I actually am who I say I am and not a scam artist. If I am a scam artist, I've been doing it, just waiting for the right moment for the past 23 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh God, no, that's really interesting. And then rolling on, well, I don't know what to touch upon first. Because you sold, I think you sold APCW first before I go on about CAP in a minute. So what made you decide to sell APCW to Casino City? And what was it with a view for you to obviously still retain control of the product that it puts out?
Well, that's a little bit of a complicated, convoluted thing, because I mean, certain things happen and then the years go on and you build and expand upon that to get to where we are today. To go back to the core of the question with APCW and Casino City / GPWA, we initially got approached to be bought out by the folks at CAP. And I want to preface everything about CAP by saying that I look back at that now and it's in the past. What happened is in the past. I know that anyone from CAP is watching this. Some people may feel that I really don't like them.
No, I think Warren moved on years ago.
Yeah, but nothing could be further from
very
the truth.
Successful in what he's doing in his own right.
I just want to. I've never had the opportunity to really say that, so I want to say here that if you're out there watching, I have no ill feelings. People made decisions. We did what we did. Yeah. We did what we thought was best at the time. But at this point in life, I don't care about any of that anymore. But at the time, CAP approached us and wanted to buy us. And you got to remember that at the time, they had already approached Affiliate Guard Dog about being bought out. And they were trying to put Mark Lesnick out of business with his with them. So there was all this stuff going on. I mean, CAP came to Mark Lesnick's conferences in Vegas, and they learned from it. And I was good friends with Mark. Mark actually was instrumental in my success in this industry. So I owed a lot to Mr. Lesnick. And so when I I didn't have anything against the Cap people. I just kind of noticed what they were doing and that they were starting to do their events. So I said, hey, Mark, you know, what you're doing has been successful, but you're getting this competition. If I were you, what I would do is change a few key things that they're doing better if you want to stay in business. One of which is charging affiliates to come to these events. He was charging something, even back then, it was like £600, £700, £800 to go to a show with at one of his events. And I was like, that might have to stop because they're letting affiliates come free. No, he said, I got it. No, I got it. And I said, okay. And a few years later, he was out of business. Now, I don't know if he would have made the changes that not me alone, but many people suggested to him. Maybe he could have stayed viable and competitive. I don't know. What I do know is that he didn't make the changes, and that a few years later, he was out of a job, and that now to this day, the conferences that were Cap conferences became IGB and eventually Clarity. They're still successful. They're still going on. They're still growing. Take from that what you will. But yeah, I mean, Cap approached us and said, we want to buy you out. And we had talked with Andy, who was running Affiliate Guard Dog at the time. And we were told that Cap basically told him either sell or we will just build a better Affiliate Guard Dog and put you out of business. This, because that was Cap's modus operandi. And we saw evidence of this by the fact that they wanted to buy APCW, and they wanted their version of buying APCW was basically shut it down, give us your domain, and come work for us, JTodd. There was no talk of giving any money for the website or the buyout. It's just, we're taking over. And there will be no, we're not going to bring Anthony over, even though he helped you build it and he's your best friend. You have to basically say, to hell with him, go find other work. I'm going to work for Cap. I couldn't do that. I just couldn't.
I didn't realize that. I really didn't realize that. And it kind of like now makes sense why they introduced their Cap news each week.
That was my next point, is that going under that modus operandi of, if you don't sell it to us, we'll just build a better mousetrap and put you out of business. That's exactly what they did. And so when you look back at that event, there are some people who may think that APCW and GPWA were the aggressors and went after Cap to put him out of business. But the truth of the matter was, we were responding to aggression. And what happens so many times is that when you get into a situation where you feel like you're untouchable and you're on top of the world and no one can compete with you, you start taking liberties that maybe aren't popular with everyone else. And I think that happened with them, not just in the sense that they were, what they were charging to people. I've had affiliate managers tell me it was not a consistent rate.
What, to be listed as a sponsor?
Right, to be listed as a sponsor. Everyone was getting different rates. They felt, and this is hearsay because I'm quoting people that were in the meeting with other affiliate managers in London, and they just got tired of what they felt like was, I use this word realizing it's just a lay term because I'm not being a lawyer, but they felt like they were almost being extorted. Pay this amount of money or you're not in Cap and you got no place else to go. We can just do whatever we want. That was the feeling, right or wrong, justified or not. That was what I was told. So when we look at this, and then while this is going on, this anti-Cap sentiment was building. We were informed by someone who, again, to this day, will remain nameless. Because we gave him our promise. That provided us with the documentation that showed the whole situation with Card Spike. Now, I don't want to go down that whole road. Because it's just useless. But that was what led to that whole situation. We had this information. So now what do we do with that information while Cap is still being aggressive and doing these things and directly competing with us to try? Their goal is not to live in harmony. I mean, webmasters lived in harmony for years. I mean, technically, when you had a website and I had a website, we were competitive.
Competitors, yeah, absolutely.
But there was enough that we could survive and both live, and and the tide comes in and all boats rise.
Well, you could say as well, this video, that's what you do for a living. You produce video.
Right.
So
Right.
you come on
I didn't.
our channel now. So, it's like everyone works together with their peers. That's how it always used to be.
Yes, and that was what we were willing to do. I mean, I've got no I didn't invent video. So, I mean, Cap wants to do video, that's fine. But it was the intent behind it was to destroy APCW and take food out of my kids' mouths. And they were doing this kind of stuff over and over again. So we had made the decision that the line in the sand had to be drawn there. And so when we got the buyout offer from Cap, and I call it a buyout offer just for the sake of this conversation, because there was no offer. And it was more of like, shut APCW down, you do Cap TV, and Anthony can go to hell. Mr. Korfman at this time realized what was about to happen. Because basically you had the GPWA team on one side and the Cap team on the other, and APCW was kind of in the middle. And we weren't as big as either one, but it was kind of like when you've got 1,000 pounds here and 1,000 pounds here, this little 2-pound weight on either side is going to cause the scale to tip.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we viewed ourselves, because none of them at the time were doing video. So we kind of felt like maybe we were punching above our class, if you want to use a boxing terminology. We weren't that big, we weren't that powerful, but because we did video, we had more of an impact than maybe what we should have based on our size.